Hi everyone! Here is an overview of the Cwicly Columns Block. The Cwicly Columns Block is a unique block that allows us to create structured and extensive layouts. The Columns Block allows us to organize our content in a powerful CSS grid where we can position and size column blocks anywhere to produce repeatable and responsive layouts. Let's add a columns block. Columns block settings are grouped together in the primary tab of the block inspector in the grid settings panel. By default, the columns block is set to auto grid. The auto grid setting means that Cwicly will automatically repeat the row layout you have set out in the edit grid layout. The column blocks you add are automatically placed following the layout skeleton you have defined in the auto grid layout. Let's open the edit grid layout. At the top, you will find the module button, where you can add the number of modules you set for the row. By default, there are 3 modules. Think of modules as being placeholders for column blocks. Increasing the number of fractions will allow you to add more modules to your row. As we can see, adding fractions leaves potential space in case you want to add more modules or stretch modules to make uneven columns that will be duplicated in subsequent rows. This is only potential space because the auto-grid system will base the grid layout on the module skeleton. For example, say we want to create a columns block with 4 columns and 2 rows. With the auto-grid setting activated, we only need to set out the layout for the first row. The rest will be done by Cwicly. First, let's make up our row of 4 columns. Let's increase the number of fractions to 4. As you can see, there is now potential space for a 4th module. Let's add the 4th module. There are now 4 modules in the row on our page. We can adjust the height, row gap and column gap here if we want. To remove a module, simply click on the cross to remove it. Let's close the edit grid layout. Now we need to add our column blocks. As you will remember, there were already 3 by default. So let's add another 5 column blocks to complete our 2 rows of 4 columns. We are going to add a background in order to have a clearer view of the columns blocks we have added. We can modify the height, row and column gap directly from the primary tab in the block inspector, as well as from inside the edit grid layout. This gives us a visual idea of how our columns block looks on the page. Before we go any further, let's check the responsive behavior of our column layout by trying different screen sizes. On tablet view, the column blocks look squeezed. Let's modify the layout by opening the edit grid layout, reduce the fractions to 2 per row and remove the extra modules. On mobile view, we have the same problem. Let's reduce the number of fractions to 1 per row and remove the extra module. Our columns block is now responsive on desktop, tablet and mobile view. For a different look, it is also possible to make unequal column blocks in the grid layout. Let's open the grid layout. We want 2 columns, the first column to take 1/3 of the space and the second column 2/3. Let's remove the 3rd column and drag the second one to take the place of the 3rd module. As you may notice, this change is reflected on the following rows. If you want more flexibility with how to dispose your column blocks and don't need the advantages of replicated rows, you can turn off AutoGrid. With AutoGrid deactivated, we can drag and drop column blocks to the positions we want. You can add more fractions, which will add more columns and/or add more blocks. You will notice that this time you are adding the actual blocks, not just adding modules or place settings as in AutoGrid. Without AutoGrid, you have complete freedom as to how you design your columns block, how it looks and feels. With AutoGrid turned off, each module is now unique as it is not reproduced in subsequent rows. Now let's take a look at Auto Template. The Auto Template property automatically adjusts the responsiveness of the columns layout for the different screen sizes available. When the Auto Template setting is selected, we can choose whether to use Autofill or Autofit. Autofit is automatically selected and will fit your blocks into the available space. If Autofill is selected, the width that has been chosen will be respected rather than the space available.